Okay, we continue learning Hilchos Shabbos. We're on page Ches in the Shemiras Shabbos, Sif Yud Tes, which is beginning the halachas of Chazarah. Chazarah is Kli Rishon al Gabi Aish. Says the Shemiras Shabbos Kedira Sheyish Batavshel. We have a pot of food. The Hosra mi al Gabi Aish b'Shabbat, and you remove it from a fire on Shabbos. Oishe Etzio min hatanur b'Shabbos, or you take it out of an oven on Shabbos. Ein lachzira el toich hatanur. You cannot put it back into the oven, tanur gas or chashmal, electric or gas oven. Kam lo tanur sheish bo matzav Shabbat. That's a line that requires triple, quadruple underlining and proclaiming to the world. Lo tanur sheish bo matzav Shabbos. Even though it's a Shabbos moed, hamavatel es pulas a thermostat, which nullifies the usage of the thermostat, and it's called Shabbos mode, right? So what's, yeah, well, no. So it's Asr. And he's saying it's Asr do Chazarah. Obviously, we'll point out that one should not even have a Havamina to do Nesina L'Chatzchila into an oven. So says the Shemiras Shabbos, when you take food off of a flame or out of an oven, it cannot be put back into an oven, regardless of any setting or mode that it might be on. Says the Shemiras Shabbos, V'ilu b'davar achzaras kedei al gabi eish, when you want to return a pot onto a fire, yesh lahavdil, we can differentiate between l'chatzchila ben diavad ukvi sheyavor. Okay, if you did it, we'll have to see what the story is. We're going to get there eventually. Kli shabai tafshel. So here it comes. So again, your test taught us that into an oven you can't put it back in. Comes along Sivchav, and he says you have a pot of food. V'user minaish moto lahachziroi al gabo rak im yiskaimu kol hatanayim de lahalon. You want to do Chazarah, you have to fulfill all the aforementioned Tanayim. Before we get into the Tanayim, in Sivkat Nun Gimel, Rosh Zalman says a incredible detail. Here it's actually the Chazon Ish, I apologize. He says, it's not called off of the flame unless it's completely off of the flame. So now, what does that mean? Let's say you tilt the pot and part of it is still on the flame. Before he gives his examples, you have a massive soup pot, and you tilt the pot, but part of it is still sitting on the flame. That is not a problem. His example is a lot of the hot water urns. What happens when they get low? You want to tilt them to get out the water. What's the problem? The problem is some of the water is clearly going to come off the flame. That's just the mitzvah, is that when I tilt the whole pot, this part over here is going to be on the flame, the part up here is not. Says the Chazon Ish, B'dud Shabbat Shalom Sheikh Sam Ki Boy Rak Ma'amayim. It doesn't work to get out of the faucet. You have to tilt the dud. It's not fully off the flame. It is mutter. Shamati b'shem mipi chachamecha b'shem l'chazon Ish. Because it's the whole water is staying in the flame. Nothing's coming off of the flame then. Here, when I tilt the pot, the bottom half will be on the flame, the top half will not be in the flame, or whatever works. So maybe you should need Tanai Chazarah, which of course you're not going to have because the flame is not covered. It's inside your hot water urn, saying it's still mutter. Yes?
In case we have, let's say, your chicken soup on the Blech, on the fire.
Okay.
It's bubbling too much, it's too hot.
Okay.
So you slide it halfway, the flame's half on there.
Okay.
Now it's too far off.
That's a different shiloh. We're not talking about that at all. We're not talking about that at all. That you want to know if you can put something back onto a flame. I didn't understand your case then. Say it again, I'm sorry. I wasn't listening maybe.
Fire covered with blood.
Yeah.
Right on top.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, that could be a case also. Again, when we come to Blechs, we're gonna talk more. Yeah. Enochanami. Once part of it's on the flame, the whole thing's on the flame. Yes. There's one more example which might work, which we have to see. People want to say, what about in an oven? If you pull out, but many people, and if you have your oven shelf, and you have, let's say, three trays on the shelf, so they pull out the whole shelf. take out one, and they want to push the other ones back in. So is that called Idena ala Ish? Lamaisa, what's the lumdis of this Chazon Ish? Well, he said, yeah. So he already says, he didn't have a problem thinking out of an oven, clearly. He didn't have that problem. So it's a Shiloh we have to get to. I think this might be a raya. This Chazon Ish might be a raya. I think he's going to talk about it explicitly. But this Chazon Ish might be a raya that he just said, as long as you're connected to the flame, you're not getting involved in... That's what he's saying. He's talking about an Eish Mamish. Let's see. I didn't introduce an idea about the shelf, but this Chazon Ish is going to be a raya. Okay, let's continue. Sif. So now, what are the conditions of Chazarah? Number one, the way we're going to do this is we're going to read through all the conditions quickly, and then we're going to actually let's make plans. Let's just do it. Number one, Number one, nothing starts if the food is not fully cooked. We look at Sivkatan and Hey, and he points us to a Berlacha that he says that filu safek im nitbashel kol tzarek gam ginas lachzir al gabe ish. Even if it's a safek, if it is fully cooked, you're not allowed to do Chazarah. So not only does it have to be fully cooked, it has to be fully cooked. So now we get to the $1 million shayla. You have something that's fully cooked. The Heilige chicken bones. They are soft. And you can eat them. Now, just to point out, when we say ru'uyas lachila, what does that mean that they're eating chicken bones?
The marrow.
No, they're eating the chicken bone. They are taking the chicken bone and consuming the entire chicken bone. This is a Yerushalmi pastime. Says yourself, what? You don't eat chicken bones. People still do. Yeah, LA, Yerushalmi, same type of thing. Yesh lahakbid shegamin kivartim v'jaz kol tzarka v'ruz lachila. Says Yerushalmi Zalman, you have to be careful that itself is mavusha kol tzarka. So if you look at Sivkatan and Vav, you'll see. You look at Sivkatan and Vav, you'll see that he says this is Yerushalmi Zalman. V'ayin in the Mincha Shabbos, v'ayin oid, which we know v'ayin oid means he argues. And Agoyin Agadol Ramesha Feinstein, who argues on this din. And the question is whether chicken bones are consumed. I think the story goes, this is when Rosh Zalman called Ramesha, or vice versa, one of them, and he called them up in the middle of the night to ask him if they eat chicken bones, because they wanted to know what's called Mavushal Kol Tzarkai, whether you're going to be allowed to do Chazarah on it. Again, I don't think this is so negate to all of us. Again, we don't eat the bone. We eat maybe the marrow in the bone. Yeah. When if you have your chalent, that's a good example. You have marrow, marach beiners inside your chalent. Yeah, so lamaisa, when you eat it, that's the point that it's at. Sif tonight base shatav shel yadayin chama mixes has to be a little bit warm. Kalaymar, what does that mean? Shaloi nitztanin legamri. It's not fully cold. And in Sivkatan Nuchas, he explains the reason is because if it's not a little bit warm, it's bottle the original shehiyah. So it has to be a little bit warm. Again, this is not such a relevant case because anytime you're taking something, again, we're talking about Chazarah. So you take off your soup, you take off your challah, and you're putting it back in. To keep it, shehiyah means to keep something cooking. It was mavatal, its original connection to the flame. So when I take off the soup pot, I serve it to put it back, it's never going to be cold. It's almost an impossible scenario in our world of lechatchila. Maybe b'diavad will be a matzah, but that is one of the conditions of Chazarah. Number 3, you need das to return it on the flame. We're not going to have time right now. We're going to come back. But in Sivkatan Nuntas, he discusses all the fascinating cases of mistakes, of taking your friend's pot, etc. We'll come back to there maybe in a moment. But number 3 is you have to have das. Number 4, you can't put it down. You have to hold it in your hands. You put it on the table. Any other dry area. And this is a Metzias back with Zman Chazal, that when they were finished with their pot, they put it on the floor. So if you put it on the floor, it's a cancel button. You're no longer putting it back onto the flame. Now in our world, what is a counter is a very, very big shiloh. Is a counter a holding ground, or is a counter a place that you keep pots there? And you can hear both Metzius, and Many people, you put on the counter and that's where it stays. Many people, you put on the counter, then it goes back into the oven. But the lemaisa is, it has to be in your hand. V'hu, and that's the final line, sheyamshich lahachzik b'kli achzon al gabi eish, that you have to hold on to the kli until it goes back onto the fire. And this is, yeah, what this means is, very good, is here's my pot. This is called holding it, okay? This would be called sitting on the counter, and I'm machzik it. I'm not actually holding it. Well, all right, look, I took it on my hand. It doesn't fall. This is called holding it. If I were to let go of my hand, what would happen right now? It would fall, and there's liquid in the cup, so we're not going to be unintelligent. But once I put it down, now what am I doing like this? I'm being machzik. That's enough. You don't need to go on the edge that you're supporting it. If it were to, you don't need any of those things. Says Shemiras Zalman. Ramosha says the same. As long as you're connected to it, that's going to be fine. Now, if it's al gabi karka, that would be a different story, because karka is a metzias of out of your hands. Then maybe you need more support to it. But again, I don't know how nagea that is, and therefore you need to be holding on to. Sif, condition 5. Sha'ish al gabo yachzor kli, the fire that you return back to kli, tiyeh mechusa. The fire has to be covered. Al yedei michsas pach uchadaima, a blech min advarim shel regin lavash aleim, items you don't usually cook with. B'yamois achol al arax lahashes leim as kadesh lo tzanin. Rather, you just keep it on there so it doesn't get cold. V'ral on a sif lamed. Kasher machzer kadei gabi, and when you lemaisa put it back, lo yosef ba kol davers lo yosef kodim again. You can't put anything extra. You can't add something in, like, oh, I'm ready putting it back on, so I'll throw in an extra, whatever. That is not allowed. So there are some extra details we have to see over here. But first, a few small details. Number 1, Samach Gimel Star. Samach Gimel Star, he discusses the famous Shaila, can aluminum foil be a blech? And he says if it's thick aluminum foil, it does not work unless you layer it up many times. That is Samach Gimel Star. In Samach Gimel, he quotes the famous Ramosha, because he just said, what do you need to do? You have to cover the flame. And everyone here is wondering, what about the knobs? Don't you have to cover the knobs? So we read carefully in which he says, even Ramosha, I mean Samach Gimel, the second line, even Ramosha says, the yoiser toiv, it's better. Lechazis gams the kaftayrim, to cover the knobs, kaftayrim or knobs, so that the hacker should be in the place that you do the chitu, that you raise the flame. But then he continues and he says, Shemiras Shabbos quotes or Shemiras Zalman, ta'af boloikis kaftayrim, if you don't cover the knobs, it's perfectly fine. Okay. Shamati Mirsham Zam. The Evshir, the Toiv La'achmer. Now this is a good one, and this we're going to conclude, because I think what we said so far, everyone might do. You put a lining of foil inside your crock pot, and you take your cholent, you have das, you hold on to it, you put it back. But there's one problem. Erev Shabbos, when you put the lining of foil in there, did you touch the knob? So often the answer is yeah, because many people leave the foil in ad infinitum. They put the foil in, and they cook with the foil in, and they make the cholent high, and they make the cholent low. And the question in Lumdis is, why does that work? Because why does that show? The whole point of covering the flame is show you're not cooking. What do you mean you cooked on it? So he explains, Shamati Mergun Risham Zalman, De'evshir, the Toiv La'achmer, it's better, Loi Lahagdilas Alahava, not to raise the flame, Achash Akisa Ish, once you cover the flame. Tim Loikein, because if after you cover the flame, you play with the flame, perhaps it shows it shows you that you're still going to be able to stoke it. You play with the flame after you covered it. So Shemiras Zalman says, Efsher toiv lahachmir. Continues Rav Neubert al dish la'ayin. A little bit of difficult sugya. Ziva is a plaster. It's called katum. We don't see anywhere such a tanai, and he leaves it at that. So certainly, for Shemiras Zalman, he's telling us Efsher toiv, and that's certainly the way that it is, and it's certainly a toiv that once you put the blech on, you don't play with the knobs anymore. But clearly, you also see from Rav Neubert that if you do, it certainly b'diavad would be fine. Any blech, either a blech in your oven or the lining inside your crock pot. If you put the lining in there and you cook with it, and therefore you raise the flame, you lower the flame, you show that the lining's nothing. So according to Shemiras Zalman, the best way to do it is You cook in the or if you knew, you could just take it out and put it back in. And then you, Erev Shabbos, you take off the thing, you lower it to the heat you want it, you put the blech on top, you put your challah on top. That is the Efsher Toiv of Shom Zalman. Pick it up from here, B'siyata Dishmaya.